Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Leanne Gugan, and I am Willoughby Council's Environmental Education Officer. We have a lot of wonderful things to share about our selected trees tonight. As such, whilst there is a Q&A available, we might not have time to be able to get to everyone's questions, so I apologise about that if we don't have time because we need to finish at 7 p.m. But we'll see. But wherever you are, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Please enjoy our talk. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, their connections to land, waters, and community. Willoughby Council is on the land of the Gamaragal people, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. I truly deeply appreciate the care and deep spiritual connection the Indigenous people had in looking after country, which has led to all of us enjoying the life we live today. And it's wonderful to think there are some trees around us now that we have seen generations of people pass beneath them. There are very few living things that stands this test of time, and one of the many reasons we celebrate all trees tonight. And so why are we holding this talk? Rooted value, our significant trees. It's just one of our knowledge talks for Council's Canopy of Life Tree Week, a time to pause, be amazed, and reflect on these amazing natural entities that bring colour, joy, beauty, and life to our world. And trees shine even after all the awful things that we can do to them, somehow surviving against all the odds in our now fast urban lifestyle. Willoughby Council has a beautiful area filled with many bushland reserves within pretty much walking distance anywhere you live, preserved by forward-thinking people and interest groups. And thanks to large-scale street planting schemes, trees are a part of our neighbourhood. But we need to go back in time to understand some of the trees that exist today. When the British settled in this area, many of the original huge trees were logged for timber to build houses and use as firewood, as these were the days before electricity. Then, when the early settlers moved in, they cleared more for farming, and by the late 19th century, there were extensive market produce gardens and orchards that serviced the Sydney area, alongside tanneries, pottery, and brickwork industries. Now, so these are some of the oldest photos I could find where we can see some of the trees across our area. It gives us a good feel for what that landscape was like as it was being developed. So whilst there was extensive land clearing, as you can see from these photos, there were trees. They had either grown back or some pockets of forest remnants survived because they were located either in areas with difficult access, for example, steepest terrain, or another key reason was because they were locked up on large private estates. But when did street planting start to happen? I thought the audience would be very interested to see this Daily Telegraph article from 1899, which reported that at a Willoughby Council meeting, the aldermen agreed that as settlement increased, the original trees would be cut down to make room for residences, and that unless some provision were made, the place would become barren. There would be no grateful and graceful foliage and no protection from the sun. This would be altogether a pity, particularly as the soil of the district seemed to be well adapted to the nurture of trees. And with that agreement, Willoughby Council appointed a special tree planting committee allocating £40 to the planting of street trees. The cost would be shared with a like-minded landowner. As more modern assets were built in, such as streetlights, the location of where trees were planted had to be adjusted as they blocked the light required for night. Many public trees in Willoughby were probably planted also each year to mark Arbor Day, which is now known as National Tree Day, in the years leading up to World War II. By the 1920s, there was a focus on beautification for the whole area. The Castle Crag Progress Association helped lead the way with 1,500 trees planted over several years. In 1931, the full length of Edinburgh Road was planted out by the association, with Mayor Bales quoted as saying, "There has been a great awakening of civic spirit during recent years. Willoughby has been, for several years past, engaged in carrying out a beautification scheme, the results of which are seen in the many thoroughfares of the suburb. If everyone extended the interest they took in their well-kept homes to the bit of footpath on the front, much would be added to the beauty and happiness which are the real antidotes to the prevailing pessimism. I love that quote in the Sydney Morning Herald, as it is due to the care from the people that lived 100 years ago why so many of our streets are leafy and green today. And so, with that brief sweep through some of our history, I have the pleasure in introducing Ash Pointer, currently Ku-ring-gai Council's Environmental Programs Volunteer and Nursery Officer. She also works at Ryde TAFE teaching new arborists and has degrees in horticulture and biology. Thank you, Ash, for joining me tonight as we take a deeper look at 10 significant trees around the Willoughby Council area. Ash and I will tag team as she has the botanical knowledge and I have researched the history. So there were so many trees that we considered and prepared for this talk. This is a map of the Willoughby Council area showing you roughly where the trees we selected are. Whilst many didn't make the final list of 10, it doesn't mean they weren't as important or significant, just that we needed to spread the love and have a variety of specimens to share their stories. And as such, that is why I titled this instead, Some Significant Trees. And how could we not start with the iconic Sydney blue gum or Eucalyptus saligna, a local species with a bluish tinge to the bark that belongs to the family Myrtaceae. This tree used to be abundant in the northern Sydney region and one of the key trees for the critically endangered ecological community called the Blue Gum High Forest. Less than 1% of this community exists in the Sydney Basin area today, mainly in the Ku-ring-gai and Hornsby areas. Willoughby Council commissioned a study in 2002 called the Natural Heritage Register, and it identifies the few existing remnants of this community in our area. Whilst the community it belongs to is endangered, the tree itself is not, and you will see the blue gum in parks, streetscapes, and residential homes. It is an important habitat tree in urban areas, often attracting many bird and insect species. So we have two examples in Chatswood to show the tree in a remnant blue gum high forest community and as a standalone planted blue gum in our streets. On the left here is where Chatswood High School is, and the best example of blue gum high forest. And on the right, on Nerida Street, are three magnificent blue gums amongst a street of mostly pear trees. I mentioned that Willoughby Council commissioned a natural heritage study in 2002 and identified then that there was only one small area on the southwestern side of Chatswood High School that was remnant blue gum high forest. It had intact canopy, shrub, and ground layer cover that was representative of this original blue gum high forest vegetation. It is on the corner that runs along Eddy Road and De Villiers Road. The trees here are approximately 100 years old, but unfortunately, being a relatively small patch and so close to an urban environment, this ecological community has degraded over time. However, at Council, we still see this area as a high conservation priority. So how did this blue gum high forest remain for so long? In 1892, a 14-acre estate called Chislehurst was sectioned off with a house built on it. Chislehurst came to be later owned by the Horden family. It was one of those large estates that had locked up garden areas and as such had kept many original trees and vegetation. However, once the land was acquired in 1959 for a high school, the original house was replaced with school buildings, and Council continues to remind the school of this rare piece of land that they have. From a critically endangered community, you'll be surprised to see everywhere singular planted or seeded blue gums. They're on our streets, in our gardens, and in our bushland. And this was just one example. In 34 Nerida Street has a heritage house, Hiawatha, which was built in 1897 for a Sydney boot merchant named John Montague Callaghan. It had originally occupied most of the block between Johnson Street and Albert Avenue, but has since been reduced in size by subdivision over the intervening years. There are 3 blue gums in front of this house that were likely planted by the owner at the end of World War II, possibly visible in this 1955 image you can see in the right. When you walk down this street, you'll be enthralled by the trees that are approximately 70 years old and heavily wildlife attracting. So over to you, Ash, for some botanical knowledge.
Thanks, Leanne. Thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be here tonight to share this presentation with you on some of your beautiful, significant local trees. So the botanical features of our beautiful Sydney blue gums, as we mentioned, the name blue gums comes from the bluish tinge that you find on the smooth bark. These also have a bit of rough bark at the base of the trunk, which we call a sock. They're often found growing with the blackbutt or Eucalyptus pileolaris, which looks very similar. However, it has a much longer sock, or we might call it a stocking. We can also distinguish Eucalyptus saligna by its smaller capsules. So the fruit pictured there is a woody capsule that explodes to release its seeds. They have staminate flowers, creamy in color. And yeah, these are, when we're looking to identify eucalyptus, they can be quite difficult to tell apart from one another. So things like bark and the fruit are the most useful features when we're looking at Eucalyptus ID. And a fun fact about our Eucalyptus salignas is that they can live for over 200 years. So eucalyptus is some of the most longest lived species, local species that we have, some reaching over 500 years. But yeah, saligna is known to be over 200. Pretty impressive. Next up is our Syncarpia glomulifera, or the turpentine. This is one of my favorite trees, and it's a very common tree around all of the Sydney area. It's just a very reliable species. And it's also common in remnant bushland, as it is here in Ferndale Park in Chatswood. So this is part of the Sydney Turpentine Ironbark Forest. It is another local endangered ecological community that we find around Sydney, and it's often found on the edges of blue gum high forest, where we find our Sydney blue gum. So in the Ferndale Park area where we found this one, it has been cleared. It's a small remnant patch of vegetation. As Leanne was talking about before, there are some areas around Willoughby and Sydney, obviously, that have been cleared for urban development. And back, during European settlement, the trees around here, turpentine is a timber tree, and they were harvested for timber for building houses. So the ones that are still remaining are those that were more down in the gully areas where the soil also wasn't good for growing crops. So this is our significant tree. There are lots of turpentines in Ferndale Park. This one in particular is quite impressive. It's about 30 meters tall. It has quite a different form to the turpentines you might see as street trees. It's very upright. We call it a forest form because it is growing up towards the light. They often end up taller and narrower with most of the foliage up at the top. The approximate age of this one is over 220 years old, which is pretty impressive and possibly one of the oldest trees in the area. It has ecological importance because of its Sydney turpentine ironbark forest ecological importance there with the endangered. The habitat for this one, or ecological community, is actually Sydney sandstone gully forest, but there is also turpentine ironbark forest in the area. And it is important wildlife corridor linked to, so linking areas of similar vegetation for habitat and fauna.
And Ash, could you please explain what DBH means?
Yes, I can. So DBH is another common arboriculture or tree-related reference. It is diameter at breast height, so it just gives an indication of the size of the trunk, and that's at about 140 millimeters from the ground. So 85 centimeters across is, yeah, it's a pretty decent sized tree. So this slide here shows an interesting app that is free to download, that if you're curious about what trees are around your local area and what used to be there pre-clearing. It's called Trees Near Me, New South Wales. This image here is just showing the area around Ferndale Park, which is where the circle is. And you can see the different coloured blobs indicate different ecological communities in there. So we've got the light purple, which is the blue gum high forest. So that's the main purple region that you can see there. Slightly darker around the edges is the Sydney turpentine ironbark forest. So those are two of our critically endangered ecological communities. Then we've also got a few other ones in there that, sandstone sort of forest, and that's where we find you. So we've got a mix of all of them really in that Ferndale Park area. There's a close-up of the trunk of the turpentine at Ferndale Park. It's quite beautiful, really nice colors in it. You can see a lot of moss growing on there due to the shaded and moist environment that it's growing in. It's good to know that moss doesn't actually harm the tree. It may block some of the lenticels, which are pores on the bark, but really it's just a sign of slow growth and shaded position. Some of the botanical features of the turpentine. So the picture of the bark there, you can see is much more rough and fibrous, which is what we usually find on our street trees where they're growing in a bit of a more open environment. The flowers, because it's in the Myrtaceae family, are again similar to our Eucalyptus saligna. They are staminous with a creamy color. And one of the really good distinguishing features of Syncarpia glomulifera is its fruit, which are these capsules, weird looking capsules that look a little bit like UFOs. So they're one of the best distinguishing features for these trees. This photo I took at the same park. It was just a stand of turpentines. And when you look up, sometimes different trees, you might see a little line in between them. So like a gap where the foliage doesn't want to touch each other. So this happens in certain species. Not all trees do it, but it's called crown shyness, which I think is a cute name. And it's just, there are a few debates as to why they do that. Probably something to do with light competition. But yeah, looks pretty nice. So that was our turpentine. Next, we're moving on to a different family, and instead we're moving away from the flowering plants completely to a gymnosperm. This is the Araucaria columnaris, which is closely related to the Wollemi pine. So everyone knows about the Wollemi pines. And this is a particularly beautiful, large, impressive specimen of the Araucaria columnaris at the Windsor Gardens Retirement Village. It's there with a few other Araucaria species, and they're worth a look. So there's a great picture of it. It's showing the interesting lean as well that we see on these particular trees. So they are known as the cook pine, that is the common name. And the reason that these trees are all on a lean is that they actually lean towards the equator. So depending on which side of the world you're on, they actually lean in a different direction. So again, it's another one that's up for debate on what causes that lean exactly. But yeah, certainly an interesting feature about this tree. It is often seen growing with the Norfolk Island pine, which is the Araucaria heterophylla, which looks slightly similar to it, and often seen near the beach. The Cook pine is named after James Cook, who discovered it on his second visit to New Caledonia. So this isn't actually an Australian native species, though we see it around a lot in cultivation, as I said, often growing with a number of our native Araucarias. This particular tree was over 35 meters, so very impressive in height. The diameter breast height around 80 centimeters, has a very upright form, growing in a garden bed, so probably lots of nutritional value in the garden bed. Aged at around 130 years, and significance, rather than ecological, because it's not a local species, it does have historical significance, having been there for a long time. and also aesthetics, which is a really important, significant feature for trees as well. So we like them because they look nice.
Thanks, Ash. So I'll take you through a bit of the site history. Frank Coffey, an American journalist who arrived in Sydney in 1882 as a reporter for the New York Herald, built the house in 1888 and called it Iroquois after a US battleship that visited Sydney in 1884. Iroquois was renamed Windsor Gardens in 1945 by a later owner who turned the property into a function centre, but now it's a retirement village. Coffey made many trips to the Pacific and brought back plants from these areas. This cook pine most likely was planted after the house was built, and the gardens were established in the 1890s. So that's the reason why we were able to make that it was approximately 130 years old. And you can see via the photos and the old photos taken how this cook pine was already quite tall even back then.
So how can we, thank you, how can we identify an Araucaria columnaris when we're out and about? We can look for these features. So the leaves are what we call awl-shaped. So those sort of long leaf-like structures that we see are actually made up of lots of tiny little leaves. These ones are not too prickly to touch. So if you have one in your yard, they're not too difficult to clean up like some of the other Araucarias can be. The cockatoos often like Araucarias too and can make a bit of a mess with the cones. So you can see a picture of the cone there. They sort of shatter and fall apart. They've got a peeling bark and they have separate male and female flowering structures called strobili. And you can see those in that upper left-hand picture. This picture shows, again, from the same site there, we've got 3 different Araucaria species all growing together. So the columnaris is in the front ground there. And then behind it to the right, you can see the Araucaria bidwillii, which is a bunya pine, which is one of our native species, as well as the Araucaria cunninghamii, or the hoop pine, in behind it, which is also an Australian native species. And I must say they are some of the more impressive Araucaria cunninghamii that I've seen around Sydney as well. So I was loving looking at those. So these were popular species planted a lot during the Federation era. And they were loved for their, very distinctive shape or distinctive form, as they're obviously not flowering plants. So the cook pine has the least prickly leaves of the 3 trees that are pictured. But yes, and it's also often seen with the Araucaria heterophylla.
Mm.
All right. Next of our significant trees is the Agorodendron trifoliatum, another one that's a bit of a mouthful to say the botanical name. It's a tropical tree that we actually don't see that much around Sydney, so it's great to have some specimens in the local area. And you can find these ones at Muston Park in Chatswood. The common name for these is the white bouillons. And yeah, Muston Park is on Penshurst Street in Chatswood for those that want to go and visit these. So in this picture here, we can see the white bouillons, not to be confused with the Corymbia maculatas that are on the right-hand side that actually have the white stem. The white bouillons there are actually some other bouillons, and these ones are the white ones because when you stand underneath them and look up, sometimes they look white due to the leaves. But yeah, common names can often be confusing. So it's much easier if we'll just call it the Agorodendron trifoliatum. It sounds more impressive anyway. So these trees are native to eastern New South Wales, Queensland, and New Guinea, and they are more of a tropical or subtropical tree than any of the other ones that we've looked at so far. They had a height around 18 meters, growing in a park setting right near the playground there. They are upright, medium domed, we would refer to that, so great for a shade tree. The age of these is approximated around 140 years. These can grow up to 40 meters high, and they do prefer to grow in moist soils, though are doing really well and looking very healthy growing in the park there at Muston Park. So significance being 140 years old is pretty impressive. And there's some history around Muston Park, which Leanne will go through. And also, it's great to see, especially in our parks, a bit of variety when it comes to tree species, and something that we don't normally see around.
So the history of this area is Muston Park is named after William Thomas Muston, and he actually was a former mayor of Willoughby, 1890. The land was subdivided in 1886 and sold as the Royal Park Estate, which featured botanic gardens accessible to the public. So you can see in this auction flyer on the right-hand side, the subdivision plan where the gardens were, and that Penshurst Street used to actually be called Prince's Avenue. The white booyongs are believed to be some of the oldest trees in the park, as Ash mentioned, 140 years old, which is quite impressive. Again, it's because it was one of those locked up estates that we actually end up having these amazing trees still exist. Council acquired the land in 1926 and the area has since been a public park.
The botanical features of this tree, one of the most unique features of it is the buttress roots. So there's a picture of those on the right there. So they sort of flare out at the base. This helps to give trees added stabilization when they're growing in shallow or wet soils. And you might find that, as well as competition from other trees in a tropical environment or anywhere where you've got flowing water as well to add extra stability. The leaves there, so the name trifoliatum comes from the leaf. So the picture there, one leaf actually has 3 leaflets on it. So that's where that name comes from. The bark is quite scaly, pictured there in the top left. And I think if you hit the button, we've got a picture of the flowers that come up. They're actually in the same family as hibiscus, which are a popular garden plant. So the flowers slightly resemble hibiscus, so they're quite small. Also, it is a very uncommon plant, as I said, to see around Sydney. Even if you wanted to buy one for your own garden, it's actually quite hard to find plants or seed in any local nurseries. So nice to see something unique.
I didn't know it was so rare, Ash, until you informed me about this.
Yeah, very significant
then. So now we're moving on to some Griffin heritage trees. So Walter Burley Griffin was an American-born architect and planner whose career spanned the US, Australia, and India. In Australia, he's most well known for the winning design for the city of Canberra. He purchased, through a company, the Greater Sydney Development Association, 650 acres of land in Middle Harbour in 1920 with his wife, Marion, and developed the suburbs of Castle Crag, Middle Cove, and Castle Cove. The Griffins moved to Castle Crag in 1925 and lived there for a relatively short period of time, 10 years. The house you can see in this picture is where they used to live, 8 the Parapet, Castle Crag. They designed and developed the area with the goal of creating a suburb in harmony with the natural landscape. The roads followed the contours of the land. They established interconnected walkways between public natural reserves and residences, and the houses were built to take advantage of the setting without disturbing it. So behind where the Griffins lived is a small nature area called Lookout Reserve. It is believed that a few trees were planted by the Griffins and potentially their neighbours in this area. As the Griffins had such a significant and lasting legacy for the suburbs in our area, I did think it was important to acknowledge these planted trees as part of our cultural heritage. To get to Lookout Reserve, you can access via driveway and pathway next to 12 the Parapet. Look for the signpost, which you can see here on the left, and follow down that driveway to a dirt pathway to the reserve that is the back of 12 houses. And there are 5 heritage trees listed in the Castle Crag Griffin Reserve Action Plan that you can see there. So interestingly, whilst a core philosophy of the Griffins was its deep respect for the natural landscape, 4 out of the 5 planted trees are not endemic to the area. Although we have to also acknowledge native tree supplies at the time were very limited. So here are just 3 of the trees that are in that Lookout Reserve, and they are around 90 years old. The others were a lemon-scented gum, and a Queensland firewheel tree. Back to you, Ash.
Thank you. Next up is the Ficus microcarpa varhilii, the Hills Weeping Fig. Figs are a very popular plant. A lot of people consider them their favorite tree species, partly due to the impressive size that they can often get to. These ones are located in St. Thomas Primary School next to the church and on High Street in Willoughby. And you can't miss them, really. So the Hills Weeping Fig, the name Ficus microcarpa varhilii, so it's a variety of Ficus microcarpa. So that's what the little var stands for, in case you're wondering. Ficus are in the family Moraceae, so that's all our figs. They are quite common around Sydney, widely used as street trees and shade trees in parks due to their impressive canopy cover. They're also extremely tough, so tolerating very limited soil volume, heat, pollution, anything that might be some other trees might struggle with. Anyone who is a keen bonsai fan would know that they grow really well as a bonsai specimen as well, just showing how adaptable they are to reduce soil volumes. These particular trees were around 18 meters tall. There's about 4 of them in the park, but it just looks like one big massive foliage over a playground, providing great shade for the kids. They have an upright, medium domed canopy, so again, great for a shade tree. Around 70 years old from the history that we have gathered on it. It was also a post-war planting, which Leanne will expand on. So great for shade and aesthetics. As I said, you can't miss them on the street. They're very impressive, particularly in a heavily urbanized environment. They really stand out. They're actually native to the coastal rainforests of Queensland, but yeah, super adaptable and grow really well in Sydney.
So Ash, that's interesting to me that you said that they are popular as a bonsai plant as well. So that's tiny, all the
Yes.
way up to these massive, huge trees that you see here. So like grown from a seed, and then you can literally have it. Is it a common bonsai tree?
It is, yeah. People like figs because they're quite easy to grow. Yeah, tolerating that tiny little pot very
Mm,
well and limited soil space. So yeah, these
amazing.
are sort of growing in planter boxes with limited soil volume again, but such an impressive size for something in that environment.
Mm. So with this site history, like many Catholic primary schools, St Thomas began as a church school until there was enough money to build a separate school. During World War II, a series of zigzag air raid trenches were dug in the school playground to be used in the event of an attack by the Japanese. These trenches are evident in the 1943 aerial image that you can see there on the left. They were never used, and when the war ended in 1945, the trenches were filled in again. In 1946, a concrete netball court was laid in front of the school, and in 1948, Father Patrick Byrne organised the planting of trees in the school playground, which is likely these fig trees that we see today.
Great. So what are we looking for when we're going to identify our Ficus microcarpa varhilii? The name microcarpa refers to small fruit, so that refers to the small size of the figs. If you grow any figs at home or anywhere, you're probably going to attract bats and other animals that like to feed on them. In the picture on the top left there, these trees can develop what we call prop roots. Prop roots are an adaptation for trees that have branches that grow really long, so they get a really broad crown, and the prop roots are designed to fall to the ground and add extra support for long scaffold branches. We don't see them as much in Sydney. We see them more in tropical climates where there's more humidity in the air, that those prop roots are able to absorb and then grow to their potential, reach the ground, and then form that structural prop root. But yeah, you can see the trees there towering over the buildings next to them. Very tough. yeah, great for use in the urban landscape where you've got the space for them.
Mm.
All right, next up, we're going back to a native eucalyptus in the Myrtaceae family. So this is the Eucalyptus sideroxylum, or the mugger ironbark. They're a beautiful tree in the, yeah, the color of the bark contrasted with the foliage is amazing. So these particular specimens are outside St. Pius College on Kirk Street, and there's about 4 trees along that street. So another picture of them there, you can see that they're in great health. So these are actually not a local species. They grow they are widespread through New South Wales, but they're more inland rather than coastal, and are found growing in quite low, fertile, drier, sandier soils in what we call sclerophyll forests. It is a timber tree as well, so very hard wood from the mugger ironbark or red ironbark. These specimens were about 22 meters tall with a DBH of about 60 centimeters. They're actually one of the most, dense foliage sideroxylums that I've seen around Sydney. Usually they grow a lot taller with quite a small canopy at the top. So they were really impressive. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see them when they're in flower because they're extra impressive when they're flowering with their pinkish red staminous flowers. So aesthetics is certainly a significant feature of these trees. They look beautiful, bird attracting, so that especially when they're in flower, attracting birds and bees, and providing shade as well. So it's good to have street trees that help with cooling in our urban environments. Also, they help to cool the roads and help the roads to actually last longer. So street trees are good for that.
Mm.
We do see them quite a lot around Sydney too, which is good.
So although these trees are outside a school, it doesn't look like the school planted them. During the 60s, council was very active in planting a wide range of street trees, from exotics to natives, including ironbarks. And the 1964 annual municipality report stated that council had an active tree planting program for parks and streets in the 10 years prior. And in 1968, Willoughby Council had adopted a tree preservation order. So these beautiful ironbarks were likely planted by council around 1965. And there are a few other streets around Chatswood where you can see these trees on the street.
Okay, botanical features of the Eucalyptus sideroxylum. We can see a picture there of what the beautiful flowers look like. So the contrast between the dark colored bark, those glaucous or gray-green colored leaves, and the pink or red colored flowers. Some actually, the species actually has white flowers, but we also see a lot of the pink and red flowered ones, which is great. The capsules are pictured up there on the top left, sort of a little bit bumpy, small capsule. The leaves on these trees did actually have some insect galls present on them. So if you go and have a look at them for yourself, you might find some lumps growing on the foliage. So these are just, from insects, but it doesn't seem to be impacting on the health of the tree at all. The leaves themselves are very thick, drought resistant, and this is just an adaptation to them growing in low fertility soils with low average rainfall as well. So good for preventing excess water loss. And there's another picture there, again showing how adaptable trees can be in their growing environment. So these ones, there are quite a lot of roots, popping up above the soil. Often the most limiting factor for trees growing in urban environments is the lack of soil volume to grow in, and compacted soils as well that limit the amount of oxygen there. So where we see tree roots growing up towards the surface, they're just trying to access that extra oxygen. And these trees, as they are used to growing in really poor soils, lacking in nutrients, lacking in water, they're actually growing really well with that, tough environment. The bark is one of the great identifying features of ironbarks as well. So there's a picture of it there on the right. It's actually impregnated with a resin called kino. So this is a chemical substance produced by the tree, which is actually a natural defense mechanism. So any insects or like borers that might be trying to get into the tree to damage it, not only are they stopped by the thick bark layer, but also by this kino that gums up their mouth parts and also apparently doesn't taste very good. So a good natural defense mechanism for these tough trees.
It's good to know that, Ash, because you do often think, is it bleeding to death? Like,
It's
so
not bleeding to death,
no,
no.
it's a protection mechanism, but there has been something it's protecting itself from.
Yes, well, some trees where we see the kino oozing out, we know that it's been attacked by pests or disease, so we know something's in there, and that's the tree responding to that. Whereas
Mm,
with the sideroxylins, it's actually just impregnated into their bark, so it's like a defense that's just always there. So,
mm,
hmm.
thank you.
Next up is Melaleuca quinquenervia, so another common tree that we see in the Sydney region. This is the broad-leafed paperbark. Yeah, a good, reliable street and garden tree. And these are closely related to callistemons, which are a bottle brush. So they have a very similar looking flower. So these particular Melaleuca quinquenervias we've included here are lining the streets of Marlborough Road in Willoughby. It is an avenue planting, so avenue plantings where we have the trees lining both sides of the street, and there are also a few casuarinas planted on that street as well. It is a really nicely maintained street too, with beautiful buffalo lawns around the Melaleucas. So it's good to see nice, the respect in the council area where, these street trees are being well looked after and well maintained. So we can see some there. So they're not the tallest trees. These ones don't grow as big as some of like our ukes. They can grow to about 25 meters. These ones are around 10 meters tall. They are quite broad, so they do develop large trunks and they do need space to grow. So they will, might lift the odd path here and there when they're grown as street trees, but we plan around that. These are broad dome trees, again, providing some shade, maintained as street trees. So again, the pruning around these, as I said, the maintenance of these particular trees has been really good from a maintenance perspective. Pruning, even when there's power lines there are a number of different ways to go about it. And yeah, the pruning around these has been done with care. Their approximate age around 60 years. They're a lovely tree. A lot of people, really like the bark feature. It can look really nice in the landscape, providing shade and also an important habitat tree for birds and insects, particularly when they're in flower, so producing a lot of nectar in their flowers. It is native to swampy areas around New South Wales and Queensland, New Guinea and New Caledonia. It's actually sort of threatened in its natural habitat at the moment by a pathogen called myrtle rust. So yeah, we're hoping that, there's plenty of them around as street trees and park specimens, which is great, and people still planting them. We just hope that, yeah, we can do something to prevent the spread of them through their natural environments and this myrtle rust.
You
Yeah,
didn't see any myrtle rust on these particular trees, though, Ash?
I did not know.
No,
No.
thank goodness.
Yes, yeah,
And
that's good.
And just to let everyone know that I did show this tree before in the Griffin Heritage Trees. It was one of the trees that it's believed Marion Griffin planted at the back of their place. And so there's a huge Melaleuca quinquenervia, sorry, don't say it correctly, at the back of that place as well. So the history for Marlborough Road, the broad-leaved paperbark was a popular street tree, as Ash said, and it has been planted in many councils across Sydney from the 1960s to the 1980s. And the reason for that is because it has a fast-growing habit, its tolerance of a wide range of conditions, including waterlogged soils and pollution, and it has attractive habitat for native birds and insects and visual appeal. When it's in flower, I mean, it's gorgeous. You'll see how many birds are actually attracted to it. As Ash will show you later, how it's very similar in flower to the bottlebrush. So these 60-year-old trees were planted by Willoughby Council to beautify the street, as the road leads down to the site of the former Willoughby incinerator and the council tip site off Small Street. The street plantings are evident in this photo from 1971, as you can see, as it's like the dots that are actually going down the street.
Right, botanical features of the Melaleuca quinquenervia. The name quinquenervia actually refers to the leaves. We can see a picture of the leaves in the bottom left there. So quin meaning 5, so and nervia referring to the veins. So you can sort of see 3 to 5 vertical veins running up the leaves. They're very leathery, thick leaves as well, so tolerating, as Leanne said, tough conditions again, which is one of the reasons why we love it as a street and park tree due to its tolerances. The flowers are pictured on the top left there, so cream colored spike of flowers, similar to our bottle brush, which often come in the reds and oranges, whatever we like. These are just like a cream colored flower, flowering in autumn time. The fruit is a capsule which is persistent on the plant, so once the flowers are finished, forms these little capsules that stay on the tree. And then the bark is pretty impressive. One of the reasons why we like it as well. It's great and very tolerant of things like any kind of physical damage. So they like using these on golf courses, for example. So any golfers out there, you might see them on your golf courses because a golf ball isn't going to do much to damage this tree with all that protective bark. And as a fun fact, they're actually also used by Indigenous Australians who use the bark to wrap food for cooking, and they use the essential oils in the leaves to relieve colds, treat minor burns, and as a mosquito repellent. So who knew they were so helpful? Also, a lot of people do try to light these trees on fire, but you should know that that would not work very well. The bark is particularly good at holding water, so they are actually good for lining hanging baskets if you find any bark fallen on the ground, but don't go pulling it off the trees. And don't light it on fire. Not that you would anyway. No. Oh, great. Next up is the Corymbia intermedia. So this is a closely related to eucalyptus species. So another one of our, we might term them all gums. Corymbia intermedia is not a local species, but we do have many local corymbias, and we see a lot around because they're, again, just a beautiful tree. So this one is located in the Osgrid complex on the corner of Reserve Road and Campbell Street. It's just opposite the Bunnings store, and it's in a light industrial area. So we put this one in here as a significant tree due to the fact that there's just not many trees around this area. So it's really nice to see a big, bloodwood growing right in the middle of an industrial area. And it is a very impressive tree. So Corymbia intermedia, the common name is pink bloodwood, and they too are in the Myrtaceae family, along with the other eucalyptus, Melaleucas, callistemons. They are uncommon around the Sydney area just because they are endemic to northeastern Australia, so not a local species. We do have a couple of local species around the Sydney area, which include the Corymbia eximia, the yellow bloodwood, and the Corymbia gymifera, the red bloodwood. They're called bloodwoods as well, due to if you were to cut into the wood, there actually oozes a lot of that sap we saw before on the cytooxylin that's called kino, and that oozes from the wounds and looks a bit like the tree is bleeding. This tree can grow to about 30 meters tall. This one is around 24 meters, so almost at its maximum height there. Diameter at breast height was around 75 centimeters, so there were two trees there, but they sort of look together to form one broad domed tree. So providing shade, significant because they are quite rare bird attracting. So again, birds love the flowers, and it's a great habitat tree because it's so nice and dense too. And aesthetics, as we mentioned, industrial area, nice to have a tree in the middle of it. Aged at around 45 years.
The Osgood site was formerly a clay pit for the North Sydney Brick and Tile Company, which owned the land until 1959, when it was subdivided and sold. In the early 1960s, the first substation was built by the Sydney County Council and then expanded the utilities in 1982. Presumably, the pink bloodwood was planted as part of a landscaping project for this new building as part of the aesthetics for the site. So in the top left, you can see the clay pit in 1943. Bottom left is the first substation, which still didn't have the tree, as you can see. And then in 1986, there's our tree with new buildings and other trees that have been planted. The Crimbia intermediate, is a beautiful tree. I really love it because of the flowers and the seeds, which Ash will go through now.
Thank you. So here are the botanical features. Unfortunately, it wasn't in flower when I was having a look at it. We did see some fruit. So corymbias have a slightly different shaped capsule to eucalyptus, which is one of the ways we can tell them apart. So corymbias have an urn-shaped or ursulate capsule. So you can sort of see there how it's wider at the base and then narrows towards the top, whereas our eucalyptus are more cup-shaped. They also have an alternate leaf arrangement, which is the same as our eucalyptus. So the leaves, aren't opposite each other, even though they slightly look like that in the photo there. And that's how we can tell them apart from angophoras, which have an opposite leaf arrangement. Angophoras being, well, our next tree, and also very closely related to eucalyptus and corymbia. The bloodwoods get their name from obviously the kino in the wood, but also this distinct bark pattern. So tessellated, flaky bark that covers the trunk and the branches is a common feature of our bloodwood trees as well. These ones also had some galls on the leaves from insects, but again, seem to be in great health. And yeah, flowering does happen from December to March if you wanted to go and check them out. Quite profuse, covered with perfumed white or cream colored flowers. And that
Our
brings us
final
to
tree.
our final tree, yes. And last but not least, a very impressive tree that is much loved in the local council area. So this is the Angophora costata, right in the heart of the Chatswood CBD, outside the Chatswood Police Station. So Angophora costata, or Sydney red gum, is another species of tree where you ask people what their favorite tree is, and it's another one that everyone loves. So outside, Chatswood Police Station, it was a common tree back when the Sydney area was still covered in trees. So we still find it in patches of remnant vegetation and also in parks. It fits in a lot of the ecological communities within the area. It is local to eastern New South Wales and southern Queensland and occurs on really sandstone soils. You can often see it growing in cracks among rocks. It's quite amazing where it can grow. It is in the family Myrtaceae as well, so as our eucalyptus and corymbias, they're very closely related. This particular tree was around 20 meters tall with a DBH of 1.4 meters, so quite broad at the base, and a broad dome structure providing great shade. It has a beautiful form, and it's in a street urban environment, aged around 110 years. This tree was actually incorporated into the design of the Chatswood Police Station, so it was considered that significant back when it was developed that it had to stay and be protected throughout the construction as well. So important for its ecological aesthetics as well, being a part of so many ecological local communities. Good for shade in, again, a heavily urbanized area, attracting bird life. Birds often love a lot of the smooth bark trees. You might find cavities in some of the branch unions where the birds actually use their beaks to create habitat hollows. and yeah, also an impressive age.
Mm. So the police department bought the land from Stephen Malarkey in 1910 for £500 and built on the land from 1920. The site has developed over time with site changes including public tennis courts in 1934 and underground fuel tanks in 1967, which have since been drained and filled with sand. The police station was expanded in 1975 with the current design built in only 2005 for that police station. The Angofra was preserved due to its natural heritage value and importance for fauna habitat. The DA required for this building to be built at least 14 metres from the tree trunk. Within Chatswood CBD, it is one of the few single remaining canopy trees that used to be part of our Sydney Blue Gum High Forest. And I'm sure we all agree that it is fortunate that we made provisions to make sure that we kept this tree. It demonstrates that our built environment can be designed to coexist with trees.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And the botanical features are how we're going to identify Angophora castatas, because we do see them a lot around Sydney. We can look for the bark, which changes throughout the year. So it soon will be spring, the tree will be putting on secondary growth, so thickening of the trunk, in which case it sheds its old bark, which is sort of grayish in color at the moment, and it will turn, have this bright orange new growth, which is, amazing. I love the branch structure of Angophora castatas too. You can see in the picture on the right there, they often get this sort of gnarly looking branch structure. The leaves, as I said, they have an opposite leaf arrangement, which is different to that of eucalyptus and corymbias. One way we can identify an Angophora over those, because they can look similar otherwise. You can also see on the bark there, those little dimples on them, which we can often see on trees that particularly may grow in fire-prone areas. So underneath those little dimples are actually epicormic buds, which are dormant buds designed to produce new shoots following any kind of stress, such as bushfire. So a lot of our smooth-barked eucalypt and Angophoras and corymbias have that feature. So yeah, there's a picture of the shedding bark. So yeah, check that out. Come spring, it should turn nice and orange. The capsule, the fruit is a capsule, so it has ribs on it. Looks a little bit different again from corymbias and Angophoras. The flowers on the bottom left are staminous and sort of a creamy white color. And the picture on the bottom right, I just like, because I took that one on a bushwalk. You can often see them growing in such random places. So this was just, flopping its roots over some sandstone rocks. So yeah, very adaptable and impressive, and loving that extra drainage that you get on sandstone soils. And lastly, the fun fact about these ones, if you go and check them out, you might actually notice some ropes or slings up in the tree. So these are called catch slings, and they are installed because of the importance of the tree and also for hazard reduction. So they're designed in the event that a tree may that a particular branch on that tree may fail, that is over a road or a path or something, it will actually swing out of the way and avoid, or hopefully, reduce the risk of any potential damage from a falling branch. So yeah, it's great to see those installed in such a significant, important tree.
And it was great for me to learn about that because I kept on thinking somebody had left up some kind of decoration ash on that tree when I first saw it. So wonderful to see that, again, somebody in the past forward thinking about how to protect the tree moving forward.
Yeah, excellent.
So we're at the end. It's already taken us an hour, so unfortunately we won't have time for questions. But I just first wanted to say to pull this presentation together, it was a collaborative effort, and I really would like to thank Ash for her knowledge, your time, and helping us understand these trees more deeply and going out on a site visit. Thank you, Ash.
Thanks for having me.
I would also like to thank Council's Local Studies librarian, Jane, for the many hours she took to research and compile a range of different information for me to consider for this presentation. Without her help, there just really wouldn't have been a site history section. And I can tell you it was quite vast about the amount of history that we had to trawl through and look for pictures. And So whilst we managed to only cover a very tiny selection of the magnificent trees in our area, they were significant because of their age, cultural history, features, or beauty. And we pointed out the different locations where you can find these species. You would also know there are many other trees, exactly the same or different, that exist in our local bushland, on your street, around shops, in a park, or even in your own backyard. And all of our trees are significant and special. Um, if you live in the Willoughby Council area and have a tree in your garden that you would like to share, we are building up our resident tree stories on our webpage, and I would love to hear about your unique story with your tree. Please do get in touch via the email that you receive from us with the Zoom link. If you reply back to that, we'll be able to get your message. A recording of this session will be sent out via email when it's ready. So I would like to thank again Ash for joining us, and everybody else who was able to join us tonight. We hope that this has opened your eyes to some of the magnificent trees that are all around us, their benefits, beauty, and our shared history. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.